Some people look successful on the outside, but inside, they're exhausted. They have income, a schedule, obligations, but they don't have energy, and without energy, no strategy will work, no plan will come alive. And the scariest part? They feel it, but don't admit it. I'm speaking to you not as another viewer, but as a person who's tired of enduring something. Because this isn't about time management techniques or morning rituals. It's about the source, about the inner generator that either fuels you or stays silent. The real question isn't how much do you earn, but how alive do you feel inside when you wake up in the morning? A strange thing, we've learned to count everything except the essential. We manage budgets, plan expenses, compile financial reports, but no one teaches us to count energy. And that's a mistake, because energy is the real asset from which everything else grows. I know people who lost their businesses but kept their energy and rebuilt something even better. And I know others who have a bank account but don't have the strength to start the day. They earn, but they don't live. Their system consumes more energy than it produces, and eventually they burn out, not from too many tasks, but from a lack of source. You see, you can have the same 24 hours, the same office, the same project as others, but if your energy level is low, everything you do will feel like a burden. If it's high, even what's difficult becomes achievable, because energy is what adds volume to your time. Energy multiplies your efforts. It's a multiplier. And when you have little of it, even the best strategy seems pointless. And here is where most people make a mistake. They try to earn more instead of restoring their inner strength. They read about motivation, but don't see that their battery has long been in the red zone. They work longer, not deeper. They expand their schedule instead of raising their internal charge. I had to come to a simple but painful understanding. My results depend not on the number of tasks, but on the amount of my life energy. That is the main thing. Not knowledge, not markets, not resources, but the inner state with which I show up in the world every day. I'm not talking about energy in an esoteric sense. I'm talking about the physical, emotional, mental strength to be present, to be engaged, to be alive, not just functioning on autopilot. Because when your energy drops, your ambition declines first, then your vision, then your choices, and finally, you simply perform functions. You still have roles, duties, a salary, but you are no longer there. And here's the paradox. People chase money and lose the very thing that gives them the chance to earn, their capacity to live. They're not tired of work. They're tired of emptiness, of living without clarity, without depth, without a real why. That's why I say, before building a financial plan, build an energy plan. Before asking, what do I need to do? Ask yourself, in what state am I entering this day? Because your most valuable asset is not what you have, it's the state you bring into the world, into a conversation, into an action, into a decision. Money is the imprint, energy is the handwriting. And if you want to change the numbers, change the handwriting. So be honest, are you working from a full battery or from the reserve? I'll tell you a story. It's not about a young guy who has nothing. It's about a grown man who had almost everything, except the essential wants. After one of my seminars, a man approached me. A good suit, a nice watch, a confident stride. He looked like someone who had everything under control. A successful business, a team, a home, a family. He waited until the room nearly emptied, shook my hand, smiled, and said, "Jim, I don't fully agree with you. My finances are more or less fine, but lately I feel as if everything is falling apart. Not the business, me. I'm 48. I wake up in the morning already tired. How is that even possible?" I looked into his eyes, and you know what I saw? Not a lack of success, a lack of life. Not an empty wallet, but an empty battery. A person who is still standing, but hasn't been running for a long time. The body moves, the schedule is full, but inside, almost silence. I asked him to sit. We stayed alone in the almost empty hall. The stage was quiet, the chairs silent, and he, that successful entrepreneur, sat leaning forward like a schoolboy just called to the board, I said, "Don't tell me about the business. Tell me what your ordinary day looks like. Not from the perspective of your calendar, but from the perspective of how it feels." He sighed and began waking up early, the phone before coffee, emails before breakfast. 100 tasks in his head. At the office, endless meetings, lunch, between calls. Evening, work again or just mindless scrolling through the news because there's no energy for anything more. Weekends, trying to rest but unable to turn off the mind. Sleep shallow, joy in fragments, fatigue as the background. I listened and thought, this is not a business problem. This is an energy economy problem. He lives as if his battery is infinite, as if he can give himself away without a break and somehow manage. As if energy is an add-on, not the foundation. I asked, "Tell me, when was the last time you consciously did something not for business, not for duty, not for someone else's expectations, but to recharge your inner battery?" He smiled sadly. "Honestly, I don't even remember what that looks like. Maybe once when we took the kids to the sea. But now there's no time for that." There it was. The phrase I've heard thousands of times. There's no time for that. And I always know it's not about time, it's about priorities. About an invisible energy budget in which the person has long been in the red. I said, "Listen carefully. You take care of your business, your clients, your team. But there's one business you've completely abandoned. The business of producing your own energy. You're spending yourself faster than you can recover, and right now you're not living, you're servicing the system you built yourself." He tried to argue, "But someone has to carry all of this. People depend on me. I can't just stop." And I realized he truly believes his main responsibility is to everyone except himself. I smiled. "Let me tell you an unpleasant truth. If you burn out, no one wins. Not your business, not your family, not you. You're not a hero saving everyone at the cost of yourself. You're a resource. You're a generator. And if the generator is depleted, everything goes dark. The most irresponsible thing you can do for your loved ones and your work is to let yourself reach total exhaustion." We took a sheet of paper. On one side, I asked him to write everything that drains his energy. Not time, energy, people, meetings, habits, thoughts, and the list turned out long, much longer than he expected. There was everything: constant news, endless chat groups, small conflicts at the office, evenings in front of a screen, making decisions for other people, even things that looked necessary but had been draining him for years. On the other side, I asked him to write what gives him energy. Not theoretically, actually what makes him feel more alive, he thought. Stayed silent for a long time, then began writing. Time with family without a phone, a solitary walk, a good book, an honest conversation without a business tone, silence in the morning when no one wants anything yet. The list was short, but it was clear. These were his real sources. I pushed the sheet closer and said, "Here is your personal report. Here are your expenses. Here are your revenues. What do you think? What's your energy economy right now? In the plus or in the minus?" He looked and quietly said, "Deep in the minus." And I saw something shift in his eyes. Not because of what I said, but because he finally saw it himself. "Money," I said, "at some point stops being a problem. But energy is always a question. You can earn another million, but if you don't change this inner economy, you'll just become a wealthy, exhausted person. A person successful on paper, but empty in the morning in front of the mirror." He asked, "So what should I do?" Usually at such moments, people want techniques, exercises, lists, time management. But I knew, if the philosophy doesn't change, no technique will last. I said, "First, you need to do one very adult thing. Admit that your energy is more important than your calendar, that your inner state matters more than the arrangement of your meetings, that you have the right not only to give, but to replenish, not as weakness, but as responsibility. We agreed that for the next 30 days, he would keep not only a financial log, but an energy log. 3 questions each day: what drained me today, what filled me, and what do I keep doing, even though I know it destroys me? A simple notebook, simple entries. But a month later, he came back different. The same suit, but a different look. Calmer, clearer. He said, "I did something strange. I started saying no to what drains my energy and intentionally adding at least something that gives it. At first, it was scary. It felt like everything would fall apart. But you know what? Nothing fell apart. I just stopped being a slave to my own schedule." Yes, his income didn't change in a month, but something more important did. He started entering his day alive. And when a person enters the day alive, not dragged, everything else becomes possible. New decisions, new ideas, a different presence in conversations with his children, a different quality of silence next to his wife. Even risks look different when you're not at zero. You know, sometimes the lesson isn't in the words, it's in the silence after them. Sometimes the lesson isn't in the words, it's in the silence after them. I'll tell you a few important things, and at the end of this message, I'll leave a bit of silence so you can see your own energy economy. Not rush to the next video, not run to the next sound, but sit with your own truth for at least a few minutes. And now I want to ask you, if you honestly created your energy balance right now, where would you be? In the plus, at zero, or deep in the minus? Then let's unfold the idea deeper. Because energy isn't just tired or not. It's your personal currency of influence. Your internal economy that operates by laws stricter than any market. And most people fail not because they don't know how to work, but because they miscalculate their energy expenses and income. They make mistakes not in strategy, but in the arithmetic of life. In the world of results, there is one principle. The outer always repeats the inner. What happens to us is rarely accidental. It's always a reflection of how we function on the inside. When a person is exhausted, even the right opportunities look like threats. When they are filled, even difficult tasks seem manageable. Because we don't see the world as it is, we see it through the state of our internal engine. Think about it. 2 people receive the same challenge. One says, "This is too hard." The other says, "This is interesting." Why? Because the first enters the challenge with an empty battery. They're not lacking skills, they're lacking internal resources. And the second has reserves, clarity, and resilience. They're not stronger in talent, they're stronger in energy level. And so they see the world differently. The same door, but to one it looks locked, while to the other, simply heavy. And here's the question. Why do most people fail to notice they're operating from an internal deficit? Because fatigue has become the norm. Tension has become a lifestyle. Lack of strength, a background so familiar it no longer alarms. A person doesn't even realize they're not living fully, only surviving on leftovers. They confuse adaptation with strength, endurance with life. They try so hard to keep everything under control that they stop noticing how life begins controlling them. And here's something important. Low energy doesn't just make us tired, it makes us deaf to opportunities. When there's no internal charge, you don't hear life's signals, you don't notice chances, you misinterpret events. The world sends messages, but your receiver is silent, and you start attributing issues to financial or personal problems when the root is the same. Exhaustion. The real deficit is not money, not time, not support. The real deficit is energy. And you know what's most dangerous? A person in an exhausted state begins to make the wrong conclusions. They think they need a radical change, a different job, a different partner, a different city. But that's not the solution. You can change geography, schedule, salary. But if your battery is empty, the result will be the same everywhere. Because the problem isn't where you live or what you do. The problem is the energy level you bring into every part of your life. I've seen this hundreds of times. A person says they lack time, but in reality they lack strength. They say work drains them, but it's not the work. It's the lack of balance between what they give and what they receive. They say their loved ones don't support them. But often it's not about loved ones, it's about the fact that the person hasn't supported themselves for a long time. Their internal economy runs in the red, and every decision feels heavy. Everything feels like a struggle. Everything, an overexertion. When your energy level is low, you stop seeing life as a space of possibilities and start seeing it as a field of threats. You begin to defend instead of create, to survive instead of build. And gradually, quietly, your mindset narrows. What could have been an exciting challenge becomes a problem. What could have been a new chance feels like overload. What could have been growth looks like danger. The problem isn't the lack of resources. The problem is that you yourself haven't been a resource for yourself in a long time. And if we want to change results, we must learn to notice not only what we do, but the state in which we do it. Because two people can perform the same task, but with entirely different internal quality. And the outcome will differ. Success isn't only actions, it's the energy with which those actions are carried out. And here, at the very heart of this conversation, I want to tell you one quiet truth. Sometimes, the answer to your questions comes not through more analysis, but through a pause, through a brief stop to hear yourself. Don't be afraid of silence. I'll leave a few moments of quiet at the end, so these ideas can settle where they belong, in your heart. And now tell yourself honestly, are you confusing fatigue with reality? Are you interpreting a lack of energy as a lack of opportunities? There comes a moment in life when you suddenly stop hiding behind beautiful words and start speaking to yourself honestly, without excuses, without politeness, without later. And we've reached exactly that moment. Because now the question is not whether you're tired. Everyone gets tired. The question is not whether life is hard for you. Everyone faces hard days. The real question is this: are you ready to stop living on an energy loan? Each of us has a limit, not physical but moral. A thin line where life on autopilot begins, and that line always arrives quietly. Not as a crisis, not as a blow, but as the gradual disappearance of yourself. You wake up and realize you haven't chosen your day in a long time. You just execute, react, pull yourself through. And somewhere deep inside lives a thought you're afraid to say out loud: I can't keep living like this, but I don't know how to get out. This is where the shift happens. Not in technique, not in planning, but in your inner courage. In the willingness to take responsibility for the state you live in the willingness to stop justifying exhaustion with hard times and start asking yourself, what in my life have I myself turned into an unbearable burden? Look the truth in the eye. There are things you carry only because you're afraid to let them go. There are meetings that drain you like a vacuum cleaner, yet you still show up. There are people you stay connected to not out of respect, but out of inertia. There are habits that dull your mind and empty your day, yet you call them a break. These are not accidents. These are decisions, small daily decisions that slowly lead a person toward internal bankruptcy. Now imagine another option. Not dramatic, not heroic, just honest. You take a sheet of paper and ask yourself, what am I willing to stop doing to get my life back? Not add, not buy, not learn. Stop answering where it drains you. Stop proving what no one asked for. Stop taking on more than your internal economy can afford. Because sometimes the greatest healing isn't in new efforts, but in ending the wrong ones. There is one phrase I want you to hear with your whole heart today. Your life will not change until you stop being the source of your own exhaustion. This is the turning point. Not romantic, not loud, but decisive. Now look at yourself honestly and ask, what exactly am I still doing in my life, even though it has been destroying me for a long time? There are moments in life when you don't need to speed up. You need to stop, not to escape, but to regain strength. Because true power is not born in haste. It is born in clarity, in an honest decision, in a quiet inner gesture. Enough living in the negative. I'm beginning to refill my reserve. Remember, you are not weak, you are exhausted, and those are very different things. Exhaustion is not a verdict. It's a signal, an invitation, a moment of truth saying, you've been giving too much without leaving anything for yourself. It's time to change the proportions. Because when you raise your energy level, everything rises with it. Your decisions, your plans, your relationships, your ability to see opportunities. The world doesn't become easier, you become stronger, and suddenly what looked like a wall turns out to be just a step. And I want you to feel one thing right now. You have the right to recover a moral, human, life-given right. You have the right to take a step back, not to run away, but to aim accurately. You have the right to protect yourself as seriously as you protect those you love. You have the right to step into a new day not depleted but collected. Because when you are charged, your words carry more weight, your actions create more change, your presence heals more deeply, and that is the state you deserve. So tell yourself quietly but firmly, I no longer live on leftovers. I am replenishing my strength. I am raising my inner level. I enter my day as someone who values their own resource. This is not an affirmation. This is an adult decision. And every time you choose yourself, not superficially but truly, life opens doors that once seemed closed. I don't want you to rush to the next thing. Don't rush toward the noise. Sit with this. Let it settle. Let it find the space inside you that has long needed order, calm, and honesty, because the deepest changes come in silence. And I'll leave a bit of that silence for you at the end so it can do its work, the work no words can do. And now, the main question you will carry forward: what is one thing I will start doing tomorrow to live not from exhaustion, but from strength?